Sorry, the cats are a bit busy. But, ow! Hey! But, so we learn the space that it takes up. Ow! Don't do it. Ow! Good morning and welcome back to One Step at a Time Farmstead. I'm Lucas and I'm so happy to have you with us today. Okay, I think it is quite evident that some of our garden came to its end, especially this bed and the second bed after this one, and are ready to harvest. Yeah, and today basically what we are going to do is to discuss is what we've learned from our methods in this season, and also we are going to look at succession planting in these beds that are done. Yeah, so what we will do today is harvest what we want and also start preparing our beds for succession plant. And we will also discuss our methods of how we've grown these crops and look at some pros and cons of these methods and discuss it. Yeah, and then we will look toward our future planning for our next season later this year. Sorry, the cats are a bit busy. And see whether we will follow the same methods again. Okay. A nice little Hubbard squash. Okay, so this season we harvested quite a few nice-sized Hubbard squashes. This one is a little bit on the, I'll say the medium size. We've had some that are a bit bigger and maybe a few that are a bit smaller. But overall, yeah, we did get some success growing our Herbert squash this season. And we tried growing them in a vertical way where we trained the vine up some trellis and let it grow that way instead of vining out on the ground. I think it's time to compare how we've grown it in the past. Okay, so we started the season with our first raised bed garden by planting our Hubbard squash, our runner beans, some onions and lettuce in the raised bed garden. And yes, we did have some challenges with insect pressure in the beginning that kept attacking our seedlings. But as soon as that overcame, it was actually quite nice and productive to a certain extent. What I want to do is quickly run through each crop in that garden bed one for one and basically discuss the pros and cons of the way that we planted these specific crops. Now, our Hubbard squash, this is now the last one that I've harvested for the season, and we've harvested, a few, and, this one's a medium size. It's not the biggest of them all, but I mean, it looks pretty nice and healthy. We've had one or two that were bigger than this one, and we've also had one or two that were smaller than that one, maybe, or about the same size. But overall, the Hubbard squash weren't that productive, but I believe there's also different reasons for it. First of all, I tried to grow it vertically, and I have done it before, and I've grown them flat on the surface or horizontal with the ground surface. And in my experience, they produce a lot better and grow a lot more vigorously when they are growing down on the ground. The benefits of vertical gardening is, yes, if you've got a small space area like we do, you can still grow your vegetables and in a smaller area, of course you grow it vertically and still get a crop from it. So yeah, that is a pro. The con for me is that it's evident that your vines will set fewer fruit or smaller fruit, and also when it goes into stress, it will be quick to throw off, in a sense, the smaller or younger fruit that is forming and let that rot off, and then the vine will utilize its energy into recovery. Okay, we did have a severe storm here, an hailstorm that basically annihilated my garden, especially where my butternut squashes are, and also my cucurbits, the watermelons and cantaloupes and cucumbers. They were all basically completely devastated. And yes, the Hubbard squash and all of that also took a beating. But even before that, it's like the Hubbard squash didn't produce as prolific as it did in the past when it was grown flat on the ground surface. Does the pros outweigh the cons in this method? And for me, as gardening in the way that I do, is I would say no. I think next season I would prefer to grow my Herbert squash like I'm doing my butternuts this year on a flat surface and not let it vine vertically or train it to grow vertically. I think it started off well. Yes, it did receive some bug damage and it did receive some hail damage, but thinking about it, previous years it did as well. Okay, yes, the hailstorm this year was quite severe, but it didn't affect my Hubbard squash as much as it did my other plants. So I think with the Hubbard squash, I'll stick to growing it normally on the ground surface. Okay, let's look at the whole bed in general. I had 4 rows in this bed, planned basically, 1 for Hubbard squash, 1 for green beans, 1 for onions, and 1 for lettuce. Personally, I think that my spacing, although I followed the rules and guidelines for companion planting and, the foot spacing between it was a bit too crowded for me in the garden at some stage, and there was definite competition between some of the plants, although it's planted to be where they should benefit each other. But okay, what I mean with competition is I don't believe for nutrients in the ground, but for sunlight. So I think because I have had both the Hubbard squash and the beans grow vertically, it did cast a shadow over the onions and the lettuce, so they had to compete for that bit of sunlight. And one thing is, maybe I should have planted the lettuce and onions, with the rising of the sun, but the way that I figured it is by afternoon sun, the lettuce and onions would receive the sunlight, and I didn't want to block out the afternoon sun from, the shadows of the squash and the beans, shoot this, the sun move over and, by noon, and then cast the shadow on the lettuce and onions. But again, it seems like it might have been actually the correct way to do it, that they should receive early morning sun and cool off during the afternoon. And I had it the other way around. But, so we learn. But the other thing is, I would see that the beans, although they are trained vertically, would push out and then basically overgrow the onions and lettuce as, they move to the edges, to the spaces where the onions and the lettuce were, was planted. So I think spacing was a big thing for me, and I'll allow for more space. Either less rows in a garden or allow for more space between, the plants in the garden, which will mean fewer plants per row. Again, after the onions the early onions and lettuce was harvested, I tried succession planting with peppers, and the germination rate on it is basically non-existent. And again, it shows me that it's because of the early morning shadow that is cast over it and not allowing, the ground to warm up enough for the seeds to germinate. Yeah, so lessons learned is, I think, with vertical gardening, I think where one gains a bit of space because you save space growing upwards, you lose a bit on productivity. I think if you grow it on the ground surface, your herbert squashes, you will lose a big space of your garden because your vines run out all over the place, but your production will increase. So I think depending on your own situation and your own setup, it is a decision that you have to make for yourself and weigh up the pros and the cons with each other. But as for me, like I said, I think our next season, spring season, when I plant Hubbard squash again, is I'll plant them on ground surface and maybe a bit away from my garden or raised beds, and just give them that bit of space where they can sprawl out and grow, and then I'll check my production again. On the green beans, the Lazy Housewife green beans, really quite nice. I think, like I said, there was a bit of competition for sunlight between the green beans and the Hubbard squash, and that is why the beans moved a bit out into the area where my onions was. But I mean, it really produced well. We harvested quite a bit of it, and it's actually still going. So overall, very well. I'm happy with the space that it takes up. Ow! Don't do it. Yeah, so with the green beans, I think they did as expected. Ow! Okay, and then coming to our onions. Yes, we planted very early in spring and hope to have a good crop. I didn't sow very thickly. It was actually very thinly sowed, but yeah, there was quite good germination at the end of the day. But then came the bug pressure with the caterpillars and the cutworms that actually came and destroyed, the seedlings, cut them in half, and yeah, so there was a bit of loss. But then again, there were also those that survived, and we did really well. Okay, it wasn't big onions. I think the biggest onion that we harvested was about, the size of a golf ball, maybe a bit bigger than a golf ball size. But then there were quite a few of smaller ones, like marble size or a bit bigger. And we used that, as pickle onions with our cucumbers. So it was actually quite nice. Very potent, very sweet, very tasty. And I'm hoping to get onions in the ground now that we can harvest before our winter season starts. And then the lettuce, except for, competing for sunlight and stuff like that, not a problem with the lettuce. So this stage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear my first raised bed garden and then see how we will succession. So like I said, I really want to do onions, and I'm thinking, should I do the whole bed or should I go half? Should I do rows again? But at this stage, I can actually see the benefit of doing a complete bed of a single crop. Still planning or deciding on that. But what I will do now is to start clearing the first raised bed garden.
Every time I try to make it on my own, Every time I try to stand and start to fall, and all those lonely roads that I have traveled on, there was Jesus. When the life I built came crashing to the ground, when the friends I had were nowhere to be found, I couldn't see it then, but I can see it now. And there was Jesus. In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been, where I'm going, even when I didn't know it or couldn't see it, there was Jesus. Oh, this man who needs amazing kind of grace, forgiveness at a price I couldn't pay. I'm not perfect, so I thank God every day. There was Jesus.
There was Jesus.
In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been, where I'm going, even when I didn't know it or couldn't see it, there was Jesus. On the mountain, in the valleys,
There was Jesus.
in the shadows of the alleys,
There was Jesus.
in the fire and in the flood,
There was Jesus.
always is and always was. No, I never walk alone. You were always there. In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been and where I'm going, even when I didn't know it or couldn't see it, there was Jesus.
There was Jesus.
There was Jesus.
There was Jesus.
My grandpa taught me about buck knives and shotguns, how to cast and know zip code, and how to work a stick shift. He taught me the Bible and about all 12 disciples, and he made sure that I know there's life after this, with pearly gates and streets of gold. He said if I just believe, that's where I'll go. But Lord, when I die, I wanna live on the outskirts of heaven, where there's dirt roads for miles, hay in the fields, and fish in the river, where there's outskirts of heaven. Now it says in the King James, in the Almighty's kingdom, He mentions a mansion that He's built just for me. Now I'd gladly trade it for a farmhouse with acreage and a backyard that's shaded and a squeaky front porch swing. That's where I wanna hang my wings when I die. I wanna live on the outskirts of heaven, where there's dirt roads for miles, hay in the fields, and fish in the river, and where there's dogwood trees and honeybees and blue skies and green grass forever. So Lord, when I die, I wanna live on the outskirts of heaven. Outskirts of heaven. Yeah, when I die, I wanna live on the outskirts of heaven.